Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry, to Gar-Hurd. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it!
Not in the playoffs last year to an NBA Finals.
Not in the playoffs the last 10 years. That's never happened before. A team making the finals after missing the playoffs for 10 years or more. Paul putting on the finishing touches. What a performance from Chris Paul. 41 points. He has waited his entire career to make the finals.
Oliver for Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Rushed by George defensively. Booker waiting with it. He's way out on the perimeter now. Booker lobs it for Ayton. Ayton looks, goes over to Rubio. Rubio on the drive. Waits, shoots. The shot is not good. Rebound Zubac. He loses it. Suns get it back to Rubio. Time. 6 seconds left in the game. Out to Booker. 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Booker on the drive. Goes up. Here's the shot. Shoot! He got it! Woo! He got it. And the Suns win the game. Devin Booker at the buzzer puts it up and puts it in. Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the defending Western Conference champion Phoenix Suns. My name is Max McCauley, and I am joined, as always, by my friend and co-host. His name is David Nash. David, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, Max. It's been a while since we last spoke. We were in probably a different mood the last time we did this podcast going into the finals, but I'm glad we took a little bit of time to decompress, and I'm actually really excited to jump into this one with you as well.
Yeah, I remember us saying in our last episode that we would definitely do one after the finals, just if we won it might be a little quicker than if we didn't. So that all proved true. The Suns did not win, David, but they did win the Western Conference, and by all objective standards, had an incredible season. So we're going to talk today, David, about what they're going to do even better next season, hopefully.
Yeah, we don't need to put a spoiler alert on that one. I'm sure anyone listening to this realizes by now that the Suns did not win the NBA Finals. I'm sorry, guys, but we're on a quest to hopefully redeem that next season, and we've done a little bit this offseason, and there might be a little bit more to come. So I'm really excited to talk about all of that with you today. It's kind of going back to the early days of 7 Seconds or Less here. This is what we really got stuck into before the team was actually good, Max. So we're getting the best of both worlds now.
Yeah, this used to be our finals, talking about free agency and trades and stuff. So we're going to recap the whole offseason so far. We're going to go through all the moves in order, big and small, talk about how we think they'll shape the team as they try to get back to where they were last year, maybe a little further. We'll also discuss some moves, as you alluded to, that are still to come. There's a couple extensions for two players in particular that are sticking out there. Before we get into that, David, how about a little recap of where we've been in the past month or so?
Yeah, for sure. There's obviously not a lot to recap other than what we've already touched upon with the finals, but in those pods that we were doing, we're doing the 5-4-3-2-1 system, and we didn't get a chance yet to round that out with the finals. Obviously, will be a little bit different, and guys, don't turn off right now. We're not going to make you sit through a debrief of the whole finals. We obviously lost that 2-4, but just to round out the leaderboard, I think it's a really good exercise to just look back at who were the most consistent performers over the full playoff series here, Max, because we did it after each series. So I thought that's where we'd start. Do you want to kind of touch on your 5-4-3-2-1? We can go back and forth here. I'm sure we're pretty similar. It was a pretty easy series to hand out these four, except for maybe the ones down the bottom here. So we can do that very, very quickly, and then have a final leaderboard to maybe touch on really quick with just the best performers of the whole playoffs, Max.
Absolutely, yeah. I think the 5-star here was the easiest it's been, maybe other than the Lakers series, and it's the same guy from the Lakers series. It's Devin Booker. It was easy 5-star for me.
Yep, 28.2 points per game. He was far and away the best player. 45% from the field, 26% from three, and 87% from the line. Very, very clear for me. I don't know about you, but the clearest one for me for 4 stars was Chris Paul with 21.8 points, 2.7 rebounds, 8.2 assists. I was actually really surprised looking back on this. I think maybe the couple of wins at the start of the series really beefed up because I'm sure anecdotally a lot of fans feel like he was disappointing in the finals, but he shot 55 from the field, 52 from 3, and 75% from the free throw line, Max. He was my 4 stars. Do you agree with that one?
I actually did not have him 4 stars. I had him 3.
Okay.
Which I think it's because Game 4 just, rests in your mind so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the stats are definitely there. I think Game 6 gets overlooked. He was actually pretty good in Game 6, despite the loss.
Yep.
Game 5, he was fine. He actually kind of brought us back in the game at the end, so I'm cool with him getting 4. I gave him 3.
Okay, well, who's your 4 then?
My 4 is Cam Johnson, David. Not as big of a role, but I just thought he was consistently good the whole time. And also, I know he hasn't gotten enough shine through the whole playoffs, so maybe that's what influenced me. Also, I want to give him credit for that awesome dunk he had in Game 3. That dunk was so amazing, and it's going to get lost, and it's sad to me.
I love that that's becoming part of Cam Johnson, the folklore with him as a Phoenix Sun. These sneaky dunks every now and then, just to remind everyone that athleticism is there. That was definitely worthwhile. We're jumping around here a bit, but why not? I had him as my 2-star. So that means that you have a 3-star and I have a 3-star to give still, Max.
Yep, my 3-star is Jay Crowder, David.
Ooh, okay.
Would you go with Ayton?
I have Ayton and I don't have Crowder in my 5 at all. So tell me the case for Jay Crowder.
I thought it's not really so much a stats thing for me, although I do think there were a couple times where he was hitting threes and it was very helpful to us. I just think he was the guy who was kind of bringing the energy the most, and he was kind of the toughness, especially once Daria went out and it was just Ayton only, really, for Giannis. And I know when Ayton wasn't in there, Giannis went crazy, but yeah, I thought Jay was kind of our second line of defense, and he was kind of the only guy keeping things together, I thought, when Ayton was off the floor. So it was more of an eye test thing than a stats thing for me.
Yeah, I think this is probably similar with you and Chris Paul, maybe me looking back on it with a little bit of distance. I just keep thinking, I guess, in general, to the fact that we really struggled in those last 4 games to generate anything once they managed to kind of shut down our 2 playmakers, and maybe I'm being a little bit too unfair on Jay as one of those guys who didn't give us a lot of flexibility outside of hitting those outside shots and playing solid defense, but that's maybe me just expecting more of him than he was during the whole season. So yeah, I can definitely understand that point.
Yeah, and do you want to get into Ayton? I guess you want to start with him?
Yeah, so I had him as my 3. I think obviously the worst series maybe of his entire playoffs. But I still thought he was really, really solid in this one, particularly with the stat sheet. 14.7 points, 12 boards, still was 53 and 91% from the line. I guess I went the other way with Ayton. I think a lot of people probably look at the finals and are really down on Ayton because of the high bar that he set in the series before, but I thought he was still really, really solid. I would have loved to see him with some decent backup at the big position, so he could have maybe been a little bit more aggressive. I think particularly in those last couple of games, you could just tell he was processing, how to guard Giannis without giving away fouls and stuff, and because he knew he had nothing behind him. So that might be something we get into with the off-season chat here, but I was still thoroughly impressed with his whole playoffs, and he was 3 stars for me.
Yeah, the reason why he went to 1 star, it sounds really bad, and I don't want to totally kill him because he was literally our only chance against Giannis, literally.
Yep.
And I think it was just so much effort expended on his part trying to stop that guy, which was an impossible task because he had one of the best finals I've ever seen in my life from anybody.
Yep.
What really stuck in my mind, though, and why he ended up 1 star for me was just how many bunnies he was missing in Game 5 and 6.
Yeah.
And those killed us. I think, maybe the series turns out differently otherwise. Again, not totally fair. I think he probably wore down. He's never played that intense basketball in his life for that long of a stretch. I'm talking about the whole playoffs, right?
Nope.
So, that was just a really hard task for him, and I don't want to kill him too much for it, but at the same time, it was tough.
Yep. So I said 2 stars for Johnson. I've got 1 star for Mikal Bridges, 12 points, 4.2 rebounds, 1 steal, 53, 43, 92. Pretty much played that Mikal role in the finals, even though we all wanted everyone to do a little bit more. So that rounds out my 5 stars, Max. I think you've still got maybe a 2 star to give out here.
Oh, no, I think I gave it. So I think I'm Booker, Cam J, Paul, Crowder, Ayton is mine.
Okay, yep.
And just a quick thing on Mikal. I thought about him. The 27-point game in Game 2 was obviously amazing. And he also did some underrated sort of off-the-dribble shooting, a couple times in Game 5 and 6, I think. But just overall, we just needed a little more from him offensively.
Yeah, and the leaderboard for the whole playoffs might show this a little bit, Max. It's a bit surprising when you look at it. So I'll run through it from bottom to top. We have now ex-Sun Torrey Craig with 1 point, or 1 star, I should say. Next is Mikal Bridges with just 6 stars for the entire playoff series. Next in line, we have both the Cams, Cam Johnson and Cam Payne with 8 stars each. Jay Crowder, 10 stars after you gave him 3 from the finals here. And that leaves our top 3, which goes in the order of Chris Paul, 26 stars. Obviously a little bit underdone there with some of the injuries that he had in the playoffs. DeAndre Ayton, 29 stars, comes in second for the whole playoffs, and that leaves Devin Booker well out in front on 34 stars. He was the player of the playoffs, and I don't think anyone would necessarily argue with that, Max.
No, I don't think I would argue with any of that. I think that's about the order I would have had it in if we had just come up with it ourselves. So that's awesome.
And that's why I love doing it, because, yeah, it shows, we could have maybe done it after and tried to look back, but doing it after each series is the most fair way to look at it, I think. So I'm glad we went through that, but we won't make the listeners go through finals post-traumatic stress anymore. The other bit of off-season news, which was a little bit more good news for both of our countries here, Max, was the Olympics. The USA, Devin Booker and now JaVale McGee, gold medalists, and my nation, which a lot of our listeners come from as well, Australia, ended up with the bronze, which wasn't quite what we were hoping for after going down to the US there in the semis, but our first ever medal in the Olympics after coming fourth four separate times before getting that bronze. So that is why you saw the very emotional outburst from the likes of Patty Mills and Joe Ingles, because a medal meant a lot to my team, even though it was only a bronze, or a rose gold, as we've been calling it over here. But what did you think of Devin Booker in the Olympics? I watched probably a little bit more of the Australians than I did of the Americans, so happy to get your thoughts on Booker.
Yeah, I didn't catch an absolute ton of any of it. I watched kind of the last 3 games, maybe 4 games of the USA. I do want to say first, before I get into that, though, I don't think I've congratulated you yet in the bronze. Congratulations. I think that means more to you than a gold means for any American, honestly.
Oh, it does. 100%.
I like the way Scott Howard put it, something like, congrats to us for having Kevin Durant born in the United States. It's like, it doesn't really mean that much to us. But that actually is really cool. I didn't know that stat about how you finished 4th so many times. So that's really cool. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. And thankfully, Matisse Thybulle was born in Australia, because that was probably the most fun that I had, was adopting him as an Australian on our national team. And he adopted us and really embraced everything about that Boomers culture. So that was really cool. Probably my highlight of the whole Olympics was getting behind Matisse. He's got those YouTube vlogs that he does, became famous during the NBA bubble there. He continued them throughout the Olympics, which gave some great insight into my nation's team behind the scenes as well. So pretty enjoyable experience all round. It was nice to watch some winning basketball, I guess, for both of our countries after the disappointment of the finals, and refresh a little bit, Max.
No, absolutely. And to answer your question about Devin Booker, aside from the gold medal game where he just got into foul trouble and didn't really have much of a chance to impact the game, although Pop did put him back in late and he did get to the line and showed a lot of trust in him, so good. I was so impressed by him. In both the quarterfinal and the semifinal game, I thought he was fantastic. He was undeniably one of the better players on the team. It's probably I'd say probably Kevin Durant, obviously the best player, not only on that team but in the world. I don't think there's a question at this point. Number 2, Drew Holiday probably, and then Booker, I would say. But I actually took some solace from Drew Holiday being that good. It kind of justified us losing a little bit more. He was really, really, really crazily good in international play. But Booker was right there, and I think the biggest thing that it's impressive for Booker is, he doesn't have the same role on that team that he has in the Phoenix Suns, obviously, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that he was still able to impact the game so much defensively, his floor game was so good, and it continued to kind of what we saw in the playoffs, how his defense was getting better. But I thought he was even better in the Olympics.
Yeah, I think if you looked at Devin Booker trending on Twitter during those games, it was mostly talking about his defense, and I think that contrast between I guess, non-Suns fans watching him very quickly go from NBA Finals Devin Booker, where he's the head of the snake, to, I guess, what we've come to learn as Suns fans from Devin Booker. Like, he sacrifices, he does, he walks the walk. He's always said he just wants to do whatever it takes to win, and he just slotted into that role on that USA team where setting screens, playing defense, playing off ball, as you said, completely different role to the one that he was just playing, 4 days earlier in Game 6 of the NBA Finals.
And you hear it from his teammates, both on the Suns and the Olympics. Chris Paul and Kevin Durant have now both called him like the oldest young person in the history of the world, something like that.
Yep.
And I think there's a reason for that. I mean, this guy, a lot of 24-year-olds, they show up and they want to get buckets, right? That's what goes viral on Instagram or whatever the hell they care about. I don't know. I'm too old to know what they care about. But Devin Booker clearly only cares about one thing. He just wants to win, and he's shown that in spades. And I'm just so excited to watch him play for next season and beyond. I mean, I think we already had a very high estimation of Devin Booker on this podcast, and of course, Suns fans love him. He's a Sun, but I think he's exceeded most of our wildest expectations.
Yeah, and I think really fitting after the full finals run that we touch on him a little bit here, because obviously the rest of what we're going to talk about, we're not going to talk about Devin Booker too much because he doesn't come up in these off-season moves. He's contracted for a few more years on the Suns, and we don't have to worry about trades or free agency or anything like that just yet. So, he definitely deserves his flowers. We're very lucky to have him, and I'm looking forward to watching him next year as well, just as you are.
Yep. The one last thing I want to bring up on him is I tweeted this the other day, and I just think it's interesting. Like, I had never thought about this, I don't think, in this way before. It's that it matters how you get your stats in the NBA in the regular season. Like, a lot of guys can put up stats, like, Monte Ellis is the famous one from the old days, the good stats, bad team guy. Mm-hmm. And that can be overblown sometimes, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I do think there's a difference between the way Devin Booker gets to his efficiency in the regular season on mostly, like, difficult twos versus, like, a guy who just then shoot a million threes wide open in the regular season. It's just different. And I think the reason why Devin Booker is able to translate into high leverage playoff situations, the reason why he can go into Game 6 Lakers in LA and just be awesome, is because he's used to these difficult situations that he puts himself in them in the regular season usually. And I think people who don't watch him don't see that. People who don't watch him just look at his stats and say, hey, I mean, his efficiency, he's the same as every other shooting guard of his ilk. Him and Donovan Mitchell are the same guy. Or, for example, like Zach LaVine was more efficient than him this season. Is he better than him?
Yeah.
And I think we saw in the playoffs and in the Olympics, it's like, no, this guy can get his stats in a lot of different ways. And a lot of players, they're used to the NBA regular season, and when they get to the playoffs, they're just not the same guy.
Yeah, I thought that was a great point by you the other day. I'm glad you brought it up here again. And I think, in a weird way, it's why we were all so blindingly confident, I guess, at least to the outside perspective, that we always said, just wait till the Suns get to the playoffs, just wait till the Suns have a good team, you're going to see. And I think we got laughed at a lot and mocked by general NBA, because then we'd roll out next season and win another 22 games and everyone would be like, what are you talking about? But we saw it every damn season of this guy's career so far. And great point to end on, I think, to round this out and round out talking about the season that's just gone, because God, it was fun, Max. It was just such a culmination of everything that we kind of thought was going to happen with Devin Booker. Definitely what we thought was going to happen by the time they traded for Chris Paul. And there was still a lot of people at the beginning of last season who were very skeptical that it was all going to work out. Yes, there was some luck involved. There always is in playoff series, but God, I just felt like we deserved that one, Max. Not the win. You don't deserve. You've got to go out and win a Larry O'Brien trophy. I'm not dirty about that or anything. We just deserved a season like that as a fan base. It was so much fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more. It was so validating in every single way. It validated all the work we put into our podcast before and all the work that you continue to put into your newsletter. We saw something in this team. I don't think we would have started the podcast if we didn't see something in Devin Booker in this team.
Yep.
And they brought it, and it was incredibly rewarding. And, if before the season started last season, I would have gone up to every single Suns fan in the world and say, hey, you can sign the dotted line to lose in 6 games to Giannis in the NBA Finals this season. Will you take it? We all would have signed that damn dotted line. Not a single one of us would have said no. So I know it sucks to lose. It really does. But, you got to put it in perspective sometimes. It was still a massive, massive triumph.
Yep, and the beauty of sports is you can always rock up and do it all again and try and go one better. So how about we talk about how the Suns are attempting to do that now, Max, and jump into the bones of this discussion.
Let's do it. And David, I really think they got better. So let's talk about that. Okay, so the first thing they did, we're going to go in rough order of the offseason, right?
Yep.
The first thing they did, maybe one of the more controversial things they did on Twitter, as far as I can tell, is that they traded Javon Carter and the number 29 overall pick in this year's draft, which was spent on a center, right, by the Nets?
It was.
And we got Landry Shamet in the trade, David, somebody who I've had a personal affinity with.
I just want to give you the floor. My first note here is a question to you. Like, what were your immediate thoughts when you saw this breaking news come through? As someone, all those seasons ago with our first pods, Landry Shamet was a subject of a few of those very, very early draft episodes. I think, episodes 1 through 3 of 7 seconds or less, actually, Max.
Yep. Well, it's funny because I looked at my phone and it was at the morning of the draft, right? Or
yep.
Like early in the day.
Yep.
And I had like a bajillion notifications. I was like, I haven't tweeted anything. What's going on? And I opened my phone and there's a million people just going, "Oh my God, Max is so happy right now." I was like, "What the?" I saw all that before I even saw what the trade was, and I was like, "Oh shit!" And then I looked at it and it was like, "Oh, it's okay. We acquired the guy that I'm obsessed with. That makes sense." Here's the thing about Landry Shamet. I think. And I made this point a little bit on Twitter, but I want to elaborate on it. I think that he hasn't been able to show what he could be in the league so far, in my opinion.
Yep.
His first year in the league actually was his best year in the league. When he was on the Sixers for a little while and then got traded to the Clippers in that Tobias Harris trade.
Correct.
And went to the playoffs that year. And I don't know if the listeners will remember that playoff series, but the Clippers, with a kind of a weird ragtag bunch of guys, took the Warriors with KD and Steph to 6. Games in the first round.
Yep.
Their starting lineup in that series, David, was Patrick Beverley, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander as a rookie, Danilo Gallinari, Ivica Zubac, I think is a rookie as well, and then Landry Shamet, another rookie.
Jesus.
And that's the series where he hit that game-winning 3 to cap off a 31-point comeback in Game 2.
Yep.
Shamet did. Anyway, but the reason why I bring this up is to kind of talk about how that lineup, I think, is what he is good in. It was not, there was no star in that lineup, right? It was a very much an egalitarian offense where everyone was just kind of contributing.
Yep.
And sort of the whole was greater than the sum of the parts sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that and then in his years subsequently to that, immediately the Clippers add Kawhi and George.
Yep.
So he becomes the spot up 3-point shooter for that. Then he goes to the Nets with what the Nets are doing, right? So the rest of his career after that has sort of been like as a stage piece, 3-point spot up shooter guy. Which he can do. He's a wonderful shooter and probably even better shooter than he's shown in the league so far. But the reason why I fell in love with him in college is because I saw so much more with him. I think he has a great floor game. I think that he can make the skip pass. He's not an amazing passer, but he's a good passer. He plays defense. He's not great at it because of his size, but he definitely tries. Like you can YouTube him. He has chase down blocks. He does things like that. He's very heady. I actually, the more I thought about this, the player who I comp him with, David, people might think this is weird, but I think Cam Johnson's a pretty good comp for him. Cam's a lot bigger, obviously, and taller, and that makes him better overall.
Yep.
But I think you'll see a lot of the similar things with Shamet, and I think it's the reason why James Jones went out and got him. It's because he's a player who does kind of everything. He's a player who is underrated of course he can shoot threes like Cam does, like he's a wonderful shooter the same way Cam is.
Yep.
But he does everything else also, not as good of a defender because of the size, but he tries. And I think that's what we saw going to get him, and I think he's going to thrive in our system, the 0.5 seconds or less, whatever they call it,
yep.
system. I think it's perfect for him, and I think on the second unit, it's a match made in heaven. Is my view.
That ramble was everything I hoped for and more from you, Max, as we came into this episode and starting off with Landry Shamet. Obviously, we're not starting off with the big ones because we are going in that chronological order of how free agency happened or the off-season happened in this respect. This was definitely the first move. I love that you bring up that Cam Johnson comp. It's not something I thought of, but immediately I think of a video I watched the other day from my good friend Durag on Twitter, who does great YouTube commentary for the Suns, and he did a little 4.5 minute video on Landry Shamet, which you should go and watch, guys. And one thing that he mentioned in that is that he can get up for sneaky dunks every now and then, and we just spoke about that with Cam Johnson getting up for sneaky dunks every now and then. Not something that you think of, and then all of a sudden they surprise you out of nowhere. And Durag put a couple of examples in there that I was even surprised by with Landry, seeing them on tape. So great point from you there. I love that you touched on kind of his all-round game because, yes, we're getting another shooter. That's what everyone thought of as soon as the deal was made, but I think there is more to him there. So I've definitely wanted to get your insight on what more you think he can bring that he hasn't been able to show on some of these other teams. But, he does have good size, 6'4" with 6'7" wingspan.
7'6" would be something.
it would be something. He's slight, as you said. Like, he's got the size from the measurables, but he is quite slight in build, so probably isn't going to get much bigger, and that's why he struggles a little bit on defense. You are getting a shooter, first and foremost. He's a career 39.7% shooter on 5.5 attempts, and just for context, that would be third on last season's Suns in terms of both volume and percentage, if you look, particularly with percentage taking a couple of guys that weren't in the rotation out, like your Langston Galloways and things like that. So he immediately bumps up the Suns in that respect. 42% on catch and shoot in his rookie season, 38 in his second, and 42 again last season. And pull-ups, and this kind of speaks to what you were saying earlier, Max. He was 40.7% on pull-ups in his first season. That went down to 32 in his second, and then 26 in that last season with Brooklyn. So there definitely is a correlation there between him being used as a catch and shoot guy only and his ability to hit those pull-ups kind of dropping maybe as his confidence drops. So maybe the Suns can tap into that a little bit. I know one thing that was mentioned was Monty Williams working with him in that first rookie season in Philly. So they obviously saw something there, and Monty was all about it as well. And corners, deadly. 45% from the corners for his career and 38% above the break max. So first and foremost, they are getting a shooter. I think to round it out, the best way that I've been able to think about it, and it's definitely not an original idea, I've seen a lot of people discussing this, the guy that went out, Jevon Carter, versus a guy like Landry Shamet, if you think through the lens of these playoffs that we just watched, Jevon, if he got chased off that three-point line, he just had nothing. He can't put it down on the floor. Yep. He can't throw that next pass, as you said, that Landry has the ability to do. So not only are you getting a much better movement shooter, arguably already a better catch and shoot guy to Jevon as well, but you're also getting a guy who can potentially be used in the playoffs where Jevon wasn't able to be. We had series there where we needed another shooter out on the floor, and people were calling for Jevon, but I could understand why Monty wasn't calling his number, and that's because he can't do much other than hit the wide open catch and shoot three. And in the defense, playoffs in the defensive side of the floor, particularly against the Milwaukee Bucks, they just weren't giving us those open looks, Max.
No, they were not. And I think you said the key two words there that I wanted to get into is movement shooter. If you just look at straight three-point percentage, you could be like, oh, well, Jevon had a higher three-point percentage than Landry Shamet did last year, so who's the better shooter? Go YouTube or whatever you want to do, find Landry Shamet highlights and watch him shoot threes. Of course, he's great at catch and shoot, as you pointed it out, but he also can shoot in any scenario.
Yes.
I think he's going to come into the Suns as probably the best. I mean, I know the stats were bad last season, but I think he's probably the best pull-up shooter on the team now, probably. If they can get him, confident again with that, he's such a natural shooter, and that's the comparison with Cam Johnson, because Cam Johnson's also such an obviously natural shooter. But Landry Shamet is a guard, so he's got a little bit more, scatterbug ability to his shooting as well. That Cam Johnson doesn't necessarily have, and I think that's why I see some upside with Landry still. And I'm not telling you that I think the Suns definitely have their starting point guard of the future or anything. I think it's very unlikely that he turns into that. But I think there's a really good chance he turns into like a really great third guard in his career. And I think there is an outside chance he could be an okay starting point guard, just because I think if you have the ability to have that movement shooting, the pull-up shooting, that opens up everything else.
Yeah.
It's you have to guard that guy all over the place, and then it's a lot easier for him to pass. And while he's not he doesn't have Trae Young vision or anything close to that, he can make the pass. You said he can make the passes when they're there.
Yeah.
He's always been able to do that. In college, he averaged 5.5 assists a game or something like that in college in his junior year. He was kind of the entire offensive engine for Wichita State, and I think that In the NBA, he's probably never going to be that, but the fact that he has been that in his life, I think is good for this team. I think that's going to manifest itself more on that backup unit with Cam Payne. I think it's going to be really, really. I especially love the fit between those two guys because they're kind of very different, but I think they're going to play very well together. They're going to push the pace. They're going to try to score. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch those two.
Yeah, I'm glad you ended on that because I think that's, if it does go well, probably what the Suns are looking at here with beefing up some of those skills that aren't so obvious. He's not just a shooter, as you said, and the Suns are hoping to tap into that. You mentioned that, ragtag Clippers lineup there. To round this out before we move into the other guy that you just talked about there, Cam Payne, what's the Suns version next year of that, Clippers lineup that Shamet's going to get thrown out into and potentially thrive, Max?
That's a very interesting question. I don't know that we have one exactly. Because that one, that lineup was really interesting because it had like Danilo Gallinari.
Yeah.
I guess Cam Johnson should be playing that role, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that'd be Cam. You'd have, if you're going to go full bench, so it would be obviously Cam, Shamet, Cam Johnson. I don't want JaVale. JaVale's the backup center now, I guess. you really want, and I guess we'll probably talk about this a couple times, but you really wish you had Dario for that lineup. Yeah. That's going to hurt. Guys, I don't know if it mattered in the finals or not, but man, oh man, does that matter now.
Yeah.
The fact that he's out for the entire season for a lot of reasons. It's good. David, maybe we'll get into some guys we might acquire to make that work because I think that we're still missing maybe what we need for that lineup.
Yep. All right. Well, let's keep this moving. So Cam Payne was next on the off-season agenda, Max. He got a surprising 3-year, $19 million deal with just $2 million guaranteed in that third year. Just as a reminder, the Suns had early bird rights and were going to be able to compete with anything up to around $10.5 million a year and go up to 4 years max. I definitely thought it was going to take not all of that, but at least closer to it. And potentially the biggest surprise of the entire offseason, I think, Max.
I expected to lose him, David.
Yep.
I don't know if every GM in the league besides our own wasn't watching Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals or when he won a Western Conference Finals game. But, here's the thing. I listened to Nate Duncan. Nate Duncan thought it was like an insanely low dollar contract for what he was worth.
Yep.
Hollinger thought that. Simmons thought that. Everybody you can think of, even the greatest of Suns haters that you hate the most, everyone thought this contract made no sense. The only thing I can think of is Cam Payne told his agent not to even pick up the phone when anybody else called. He just wanted to be here so badly.
Yeah.
But it's the partial guarantee of $2 million in the third year, David. What? Why did he need to take that?
Yeah, it doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. Maybe he just had a figure in mind, money wise, that he was happy to take, and that little bit extra in the third year tipped it over the top. But yeah, as I said, big surprise. He only walks out with. Just doing maths off the top of my head here, kind of around $15 million guaranteed. Hopefully sees out that 3 years, $19 million. And if we're right about this being such a great value contract, it's hard to see that he won't see out the full 3 years in Phoenix. But you get 8.4 points per game, 3.6 assists to only 1 turnover. He shot 48, 44, and 89, which after a whole season of that and then the bubble, we have to start wondering whether he's just going to be that good, particularly from three. That's a pretty big sample size now, Max. But I guess on this point, I'll play a quick game with you. Better contract than Cam Payne this offseason. I've got a whole bunch of point guards here and their contracts, and you can just tell me whether you think it is better than Cam Payne's or not, Max. You ready?
This is going to be a really easy game, but go on.
Devontae Graham, 4 years, $47 million.
That is a worse contract than Cam Payne's.
Derrick Rose, 3 years, $43.5 million.
Worse.
TJ McConnell, 4 years, $33 million.
So much worse.
This might be the only one. Reggie Jackson, 2 years, $21 million.
Yeah, that is the only one. Those are about equal to me because I think Reggie Jackson was a little better than him, but Cam Payne was making less and a better deal. So,
and just so everyone, Reggie was in the exact same position, or the Clippers were. They could only pay Reggie exactly the same as what the Suns could pay Cam Payne, and I thought that Reggie may have leveraged that into a third year and make it more like $33 million, but he is 31 compared to Cam Payne at 27, so that's probably the big difference there.
Well, and the other thing on that one, David, I want to point out is Cam Payne could still get better.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Like we're underpaying him for what he did last year. I feel like we're still underpaying for that. He could. I mean, he's only had a year in the league where he was actually like good and able to like work on himself really, and like in the context of being good. Like he could come back next year and just be even better, and then this contract looks even sillier.
Hold that thought, Max. Hold that thought.
Okay. Will do.
Kemba Walker, 2 years, almost 18 million.
Campaign.
Another one that maybe might push it. Patty Mills, my guy, 2 years, 12 million with the Nets.
That is closer. For the context of what the Suns need, I'd rather have Campaign on his contract for sure.
I agree. And then we get into some, definite no's. Corey Joseph, 2 years, 10 million. Ish Smith, 2 years, 9 million. George Hill, 2 years, 8 million. He's 35, by the way. And then a whole bunch of crap, including Dennis Schroeder having to take a 1 year, $5.8 million, which is pretty good value for Boston, particularly after Dennis absolutely fumbled his free agency. But let's go to that thing now, because I did have that question to throw at you, because he is 27. He's had quite a weird, I guess, development arc in the NBA after being drafted, going out of the league, and then the Suns giving him a lifeline. All of these deals, you are paying for the future rather than the past here, even though we did give him a little bit of money probably to, say thanks for the bubble and last year playing at the minimum. What can he improve on? How does this become an even better contract for the Phoenix Suns next year, Max?
I think it's probably just consistency, right? And that's if any player who can reach the heights that he reached in like Game 2 of the Western Conference Finals again, for an example, and even Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals, he was very good in. It's just that's the thing that separates really, really good players from just okay players is, can you bring it every single night, right? Because every player in the NBA who's even decent has great nights.
Yeah.
And so how many nights can he have that are great? And also, how much can he handle being a starter? And I think we're going to get that answered a lot more, and this is a theme that I'm going to bring up a couple times in this podcast, is that I really expect and hope the Suns are going to rest Chris Paul more in this upcoming regular season than they did last year, where they basically didn't. I think he missed 2 games total last year.
Yep.
In the regular season. So I think we're going to want to do a lot more of that. So the campaign's going to show us, like, hey, when you start with Booker, how do you play? Like, are you able to be a reasonable starting point guard in the NBA when you do that? And I think in the the playoffs so far, that was a pretty good answer, right? I mean, he was great when he was forced into starting. So I think that early signs are good, but the key is consistency. Can he do it over a long term?
One reason I'm really confident is what you just mentioned there. It's not that he had a great regular season and then dropped off in the playoffs. Like, yes, he had his moments, his down moments in the playoffs, just like pretty much every guy wearing a Phoenix Suns jersey did at some point during those playoffs. But he took it from 8.4 points per game to 9.3 in basically the exact same amount of time. So it's not like he just got more time. His assists dropped from just 3.6 to 3.2 with the same amount of turnovers. So it's not like he became a turnover merchant in the playoffs with the extra attention or anything like that. And the splits dropped a little bit, 43, 37, 89 compared to 48, 44, 89, but not a tremendous amount, and certainly not a shocking amount when the competition is ramping up in the playoffs. And as you said, he also had he had 2 spot starts. One was a decent game, and the other was an extraordinary game. 29 points, 9 assists, and a 0 turnover game in what was an absolutely crucial Game 2 against the LA Clippers in the Western Conference Finals there. So that's why I'm confident. It's not like we're gambling on a guy who had a great regular season and then faltered in the playoffs, and we're kind of like, oh, well, maybe he'll get better and play up to this contract and get a bit more consistent. We're actually talking about a guy who's shown the consistency in the most pressure that the NBA can give you, and now we're talking about how we can maybe take it up another level and get even better, which that's really exciting for me. I think for me it's, and I think he even noted this in an interview recently, it's the finishing around the rim. He gets to the rim because of his good shooting and because of his quick first step. Maybe guys allow him to get to the rim because they know he's not a great finisher there, so that'll be interesting to see. But the NBA playing defense, you're giving up one thing to take away another, so the shooting just becomes even more dangerous if guys start laying off him a little bit to stop him getting from the rim. So if he can just finish a little bit better, he's 51% at the rim this year. The league average is like 58. He really needs to get up around that league average to just be a little bit more dangerous. And if he can add that, then this contract's just going to be an absolute steal, Max.
You'd like to see him maybe add something in the mid-range too, just something he can go to, because he really doesn't have much.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, I totally agree with you, by the way. That is probably the biggest weakness in his game. But again, we're paying him $6 million a year.
Yes.
And $2 million on the last year guaranteed. Like, this is an A+++++ contract. And I don't even understand it. It's like beyond your wildest dreams level of contract. Maybe the best contract the Suns have had in in recent
particularly given the leverage, as we said at the top, the leverage him and his agent had.
Yep.
The Suns weren't going to be able to replace him other than using an exception that they ended up using on another player. So we were going to be robbed of depth somewhere if Cam Payne left for another team. Or if he took us right up to the maximum we could pay, then, other issues with the total salary bill were going to come into it. So just a home run from the Suns' perspective. I hope they don't turn around and then, use it against Cam at some point and trade him away. That's always the business of the NBA. He clearly wants to be here, and he is going to be matched up now with a guy that you just mentioned before for the next 2 or 3 years. We're pretty much solid at the point guard position, and that might be a nice segue into talking about the next guy, Max.
Chris Paul signed a 4-year, $120 million contract, David, but that's a little bit misleading because his third year, it's a partial guarantee of about $16 million, 15.8.
Yep.
Fourth year is totally non-guaranteed. I'm going to give the floor to the guy who basically said this is going to be the contract in your newsletter.
I didn't quite get it right. I was like,
not quite, because you couldn't even imagine how good it was going to be.
Yeah, that was the kicker. Really, that's how I get myself out of not quite getting it right. I never imagined that with the competition that I heard was around for Chris Paul and the leverage that he had, that we would get a deal like this. But as you said, we're getting a guy who scored 16.5 points per game, 8.9 assists, 1.4 steals, and just 2.2 turnovers. Almost had a 50-40-90 season, Max. He was 49.9, 39.5, and 93.4, which was the best he shot for his career from the free throw line last season. He was an all-star and an all-NBA player at 36 years old. So there's not much to discuss about the player. We all know what we're getting with Chris Paul coming back. So as you said, I want to talk about the contract a little bit. I think from the leverage point of view, Paul had quite a bit here with that player option. He could leave and the Suns would have been screwed, losing one of their best players that got them to the NBA Finals. He also could have opted in, and the Suns' free agency would have got a lot harder as well. I've got it here. If he opted in and we did all the moves that we've still done, we'd be over the apron this season, which is not what the Suns want to be, given that they're going to be a tax-paying team, hopefully, for the next few seasons, as we'll get to at the end of the episode here. But without it, all of a sudden, we're still $6 million under the tax. So he had a lot of leverage there in that decision. The Suns had some leverage too. CP3 wanting to cash in on that great year at 36, maybe one last big contract for him, had the great finals run. The Suns couldn't, after finally getting back to the playoffs and making it all the way to the finals, that particularly with a guy like Devin Booker, there's no way they could have tried to play cat and mouse with Chris Paul and potentially lose him to a New York or a New Orleans or something like that. So I think both parties at the end of the day realized they were going to be better with each other going forward. So here's how I think about the deal, Max. He had 44 guaranteed in that player option. The Suns essentially paid $30 million extra for a second year and the possibility to have him for a third year. So it's basically a $15 million player option for 23-24 if they want it. And we talk about that fourth year. I was a bit off the mark in my newsletter. I thought they were going to use that loophole to pay him a little bit of extra money. The only thing I can think of right now, I've been scratching my head on this, why they even included the fourth year, Max, is say something disastrous happens and we end up not picking up that third year and he has that 15.8 mil guaranteed. We can stretch that at just a tick over $3 million over 5 years, because we would be waiving him in the third year and he has a fourth year on the contract. You can then double that +1. So 2 times 2 equals 4. Bit of quick math for everyone at home. +1 equals 5. So we can actually take that $15 million and stretch it over 5 years if that's what they want to do. Obviously, I think personally, essentially what's a $15 million player option for year 3, I think the Suns will be taking that up. But, career-ending injury or something like that, if it happens, I think that's the flexibility that the Suns wanted here, Max.
I think that's certainly one of the reasons, and probably the team-based reason. The other reason I would guess is because agents and players love those big numbers. They could Twitter says 4 years, 120. That's what they wanted that to be all over Twitter. And they wanted all the celebrations, all the text coming in. Oh, you got 120, Chris. That's definitely the other side of that.
Yeah, you'll notice Chris Haynes just said 4 years, $120 million in that first tweet. And yeah, I think you're right on the money with that one, Max.
The agents tend to do those things. But I think we're both on the same page here. Amazing. Better contract than I was expecting. And really, all that mattered was keeping him. I would have been much happier listen, if it came down to it and we had to, I don't even know if this is CBA legal, but I would have done 120 straight up guaranteed. I would have done it. You have to. If you have to.
They could have done it.
We had to keep him. They could have done it. So we had to keep him, man. We had to. That was all that mattered. I mean, the other things mattered too, but it was the most important thing by far. And we did it, and I'm happy, David.
Yeah, that's why I was so shocked, because the Suns, as far as the leverage game goes, I think Chris Paul actually had more leverage, particularly with what I've heard about other offers that were out there. Obviously, he chose the Suns in the first place because of the location and distance to his family. The 2 LA teams where his family are based couldn't do anything close to this deal, so he had no leverage there, but yeah, I really thought he could have pushed them a little bit further, which I guess is a good sign, again, for the front office and ownership and the whole relationship with players. But I guess just talking about Chris Paul, the player, for a brief second, with 2 very quick questions for you, Max, and I guess for all the listeners at home to think about as well. How long can we expect, 2021 Chris Paul? Is it 1 more season, 2 more seasons? And then you mentioned him resting a little bit more. I guess just taking a step back on the court, what does a step back Chris Paul aging look like in, say, year 2, year 3 of this contract? I still think he can be a really great floor general that's maybe not looking for his shot just as much and is instead just setting up everyone else. So I'm feeling pretty good about the contract, but what does non-All-NBA Chris Paul look like in a couple of years for the Suns?
Well, this is all hypothetical because he's vegan now, David, so he's actually going to get better. He's actually going to get better.
Superhuman.
Yeah. No, I think the thing about Chris Paul is, you expect his game to age well because he doesn't rely on athleticism at all. Chris Paul doesn't finish under the rim in traffic at all. That's not part of what he does. It's all about his mind.
Yep.
And even his jump shot, even when he was broken, obviously he could still kind of get it off and still score sometimes.
Yep.
Because it's not about with him at all about what his body is doing. His body just has to allow him to play, and he runs into trouble with that sometimes. We saw that in the playoffs. Sometimes his body was not allowing him to play, or not allowing him to play very well.
Yes.
But I think because of that, I think that's what it's going to be with Chris Paul. I think it's going to be when he's on the floor and healthy, it's going to be the same thing for the most part. Maybe there'll be slight, decrease slightly in his play a little bit as he gets older. But I think mostly it's going to be about, how much can he be on the floor. And I think as we go on, it'll be harder and harder to keep him on the floor, is my guess. If I had to guess anything he gets worse at, maybe it's just some of the, the penetrating and dishing. He won't be able to do that at all. But I don't see why he will stop being able to shoot threes well or get his mid-range up. That stuff should stick around. Maybe some of his conditioning will get worse because he just won't be able to work out as much. So maybe he'll have to play fewer minutes. I expect that maybe. But overall, I don't really expect us to see him be a lot worse, just less of him, I guess is what I'd say.
Yeah, I think 2 players we mentioned even not that long ago on the pod that definitely come to mind are both Steve Nash and John Stockton. And I think you hit the nail on the head there. The Steve Nash comp, obviously, he hit a wall where his body just couldn't go anymore, and it's the Suns' job to make sure that a guy like Chris Paul doesn't hit that same wall, both through rest and treatment. Nash looked after his body incredibly. It just gave up on him in the end. And
well, and also one thing I'll say too on that, just real quick, is that it's 2021, not 2011. We've just gotten better at this.
Correct.
Like Tom Brady's like 45 years old, or whatever Tom Brady is. Like that would have been impossible before. But go on, sorry.
And I think Paul has less kind of body blows than Steve Nash did throughout his career.
Yeah.
He, had a little bit more treatment on the court than Chris Paul has had to deal with. And then Stockton, the other player from what you said, is like, he's the guy that you put up there that, basically played till he was 40 and was, if not the same, very close to the exact same player right up until the day he left the NBA. And that's what you're kind of looking for here with Chris Paul. But fun fact to end here, Max, before we go on to JaVale McGee, and then did you know CP3 is currently the longest contracted player on the Phoenix Suns until the 24-25 season.
Wow. That's pretty crazy. We have him for a while. Last thing I want to finish up on Chris Paul, then we can go, is Game 6 against the Clippers was the best game Chris Paul played for the Suns all season, right?
Yep.
It's because he's reserving that stuff, and he's so smart. He knows when we need him, when we don't, right? He's not going to do that in the regular season, even less so than he did last season. He doesn't need to.
Agreed.
So I think that's a big part of what he's going to do. But anyway, let's go on to JaVale McGee. About 1 year, $5 million for his services.
Yep.
David, I mean, we don't spend a lot of time on him. He's perfectly serviceable. He's what we needed. We needed a large, semi-athletic, although he's kind of old now, 34 years old. Backup big who can kind of spell Ayton, and also, Ayton's in foul trouble coming in and reasonably defend guys like Giannis.
Yep.
We certainly needed him. I think his contract was odd. I think that it foreshadowed the fact that we didn't do a whole lot else afterwards. Mm-hmm. But I don't know, David, what do you think about JaVale McGee?
Yeah, I think they clearly wanted just 1 year, and they were happy to spend about half the available mid-level exception. The other guys that fit into that tier that we didn't go are Robin Lopez, Gorgie Deng, Enes Kanter, Dwight Howard, Hassan Whiteside, Andre Drummond, Dwayne Dedmon, Cody Zeller. I guess you could argue there's a few names there that took the same or less than JaVale that you could maybe argue the Suns could have targeted, but they targeted McGee. They went after him early. There was the stuff about Chris Paul being really impressed with him with the Denver Nuggets in the playoff series that they played, in a particular stretch late in the game where Chris Paul actually pulled him aside at the end of the game.
Yep.
I think the important thing for me is and I do think that the Suns maybe have overreacted a little bit to a couple of playoff series here and what happened at the very end and the pointy end here, but if you look at per 36 between DeAndre Ayton last year and JaVale McGee, and I will say there's a lot of problems with comparing per 36 numbers, but 17 points for DeAndre, 17.9 for JaVale, 1.4 blocks for DeAndre, 2.9 for JaVale, 12.4 rebounds and 12.7 rebounds for JaVale. They basically shoot the same from the floor. DeAndre's way more efficient, I should say, actually. Get to the line similar amounts. So I'm by no means am I saying JaVale is the same player as DeAndre Ayton. Please, guys.
I wish you were.
What I'm getting at here, and it's something that we've talked about with the point guard position, and I think it's something that James Jones really likes and Monty Williams really likes. They can basically get 48 minutes of the same player.
Yeah.
And JaVale can't do it for as long as DeAndre, so guys, don't come at me thinking I'm saying JaVale is the same guy as DeAndre. He definitely is not. But last season's version of DeAndre, he's got more in him, but they really like him playing that very simple role. And I think what they've said is, let's go get a guy who can spot start for DeAndre, just like Cam Payne can spot start for Chris Paul in a pinch, and can give us 48 minutes of the exact same archetype of player. And they just targeted it and they went out and got it. Again, and last thing I would say, 3.9 offensive rebounds to 4.1 to JaVale. So again, very similar player that they can plug in that role and roll out, and that's why they're happy to pay $5 million for 1 year, and he brings some championship experience as well, Max.
Yeah, two very quick things, and you touched on both of them. The first one being that Denver was a terrible team for him to be on.
Yes.
Made no sense. He needs somebody like Chris Paul to set him up. Like, he's a fine finisher.
Yep.
But when he's backing up Nikola Jokic, who's the entire offensive engine of Denver, it doesn't make any sense at all. So I think it makes a lot more sense on this team, and I think that makes and he should be better offensively than he was last year.
Yep.
And then second, you touched on the very end there. I think a big part of this was he's won a title. he just won a gold medal.
Yep.
This is somebody who we know is not going to be afraid of the moment and is going to, is going to show up. And I think that's huge for this team because I guarantee you James Jones is looking at 2022 and he should be as our best chance to win a title with this core right now. And so, makes sense to me.
All right. Should we do Did You Know, Max?
Let's do it.
All right, given this episode is our off-season wrap, it only felt right to mix all things NBA off-season into one Did You Know segment, draft, trades, and of course, free agency. So with us going to talk about Ayton and Bridges' looming rookie extensions at the end of this chat, I pose this question to you, Max. Did you know DeAndre and Mikal are set to become just the 6th and 7th Suns rookies drafted or traded for in the first round to make it to their second contract since the year 2000. First question right off the top now. How many of the 5 Suns who have been signed to a second long-term contract in Phoenix since 2000 can you name, Max?
Okay, Amari Stoudemire.
Amari, 2002 draft, signed a 5-year, $75 million extension with the Suns after his rookie deal.
Sean Marion.
Too early.
Oh, too early. Okay, since 2000. Okay. Goran Dragic.
Nope.
Okay, Leandro Barbosa?
Yep, signed a 5-year, $33 million extension in 2007.
Devin Booker?
Signed a 5-year max rookie extension worth $158 million.
So they have to be drafted by the Suns, right?
Or traded for on draft night.
Okay, or traded draft nights. Not
Neither of these two guys were traded for, though. They were draft picks by the Suns.
I was thinking Eric Bledsoe, but he wouldn't count because it was not draft night. Okay,
No.
You go ahead because I don't know.
All right, we have TJ Warren from the 2014 draft who signed a 4-year, $50 million extension, and Markieff Morris from 2011 signed a 4-year extension that he famously split with his brother Marcus. Keith's share of that was $32 million. But Max, where does that leave us with all those who didn't make it past their rookie deal with Phoenix? Of course, it's time for a bit of where are they now? 2000, Jake Socolides. Remember him, Max?
I do remember him, David.
The 25th pick in the 2000 draft. And the most interesting thing I could find about Jake is that he actually wasn't Greek and Jake Socolides wasn't even his name. It turns out his real name was Alexei Ledkov and he was born in Russia.
Wow. Okay.
2002, Max, do you remember who was drafted in the same class as Amari?
Still trying to get over what you just said. Is that the Casey Jacobson year?
That is the Casey Jacobson year.
Okay.
You are on fire recently, who is now a college basketball analyst for Fox Sports, apparently. 2003, Zarko Kabaka, the 17th choice in the draft, who now works in the front office of Fenerbahce, who most recently hired Igor Kokoskov before he came back to the NBA with Dallas. Quick roundup now of the lean years in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Orlando Tucker, who was recently accused of trying to steal the head coaching job while being an assistant with the University of Wisconsin. 2008, Robin Lopez, who just signed the same deal as JaVale McGee, 1 year, $5 million with the Orlando Magic. 2009, Earl Clark, who has played in China, Turkey, Montenegro, Korea, and now Spain since leaving the NBA. 2012, Kendall Marshall, recently named the director of recruiting at UNC, where he was drafted from by the Suns. 2013, Archie Goodwin was last seen playing in France. 2014, Tyler Ennis has battled really bad leg injuries, but is still toiling away in the professional leagues of Turkey. And finally, 2016, Dragan Bender, currently playing with Maccabi Tel Aviv, the same team he was drafted from 5 years ago as a rookie, and that we all fell for, Max. But Max, I've left off 2 other recent rookies from before Ayton and Bridges, and for very good reason. Can you tell me the most 2 recent failed first-round picks by the Phoenix Suns?
Josh Jackson was definitely a failure.
Correct. And this one was a trade.
Marquise Chris?
Correct. Marquise Chris and Josh Jackson. And here's why I left them off, Max. Marquise Chris was traded to the Rockets in a package that returned DeAnthony Melton before Melton was traded with Josh Jackson in a package for Javon Carter. Max, who was Javon Carter just traded for? Your guy, Landry Shamet. So Landry becomes the last remaining piece from those 2 recent draft fails, and he's hoping he can continue as a Phoenix Sun. Finally, Max, before we move on, I'll leave you with this. Devin Booker has the chance to be the first Phoenix player ever to sign a 3rd consecutive contract to continue his career with the Suns after coming to the team as a rookie as far back as the 1980s, and he will join a club with possibly two of my favourite ever Suns in the meantime, Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire, who did sign third contracts with the Suns, but under interesting circumstances. Steve Nash was, of course, traded to Dallas on his rookie deal, where he signed his second contract before returning to the Suns as a free agent and signing his third contract with the team. A 5-year, $65 million deal. What a bargain in today's terms. As for Amari, he signed his rookie deal, second deal, and technically his third deal with the Suns, another 5-year deal, this one worth $100 million, but it was a sign and trade to the Knicks. So Max, first we hope the Suns can add Ayton and Bridges to this exclusive group of Suns who actually make it to their second contract in Phoenix. But not long after that, I sure hope Devin Booker can make real history by becoming one of the only ever Suns to be drafted by the franchise and make it through to his third contract with the team. It's not often we end with a quiz, Max, but you've had it pretty easy this time around, so there's a first time for everything. Here it goes. Where does Devin Booker rank right now in points and then games played in Suns franchise history?
Oh, jeez. In total points and in total games played, I would guess he's like 15th in points and like 40th a game. No, more like 30th in games played.
A little bit better than that. Games played, he's 16th with 409.
Wow, okay.
And points, he is 9th with 9,395 points. Really quick side quiz. How many names can you throw up that would fill the 8 spots before him, Max?
Walter Davis.
1.
Sean Marion.
2.
Kevin Johnson.
3.
I'm trying to think if it would be Amari. Did I say Amari?
4.
Okay. Did I say? I said Marion already.
Yeah.
Nash. I said Nash.
Is 5.
Oh. Let's go. Oh, who are those guys? Alvin Adams.
6.
Barkley didn't play here long enough, I don't think.
No, you're right about that.
Connie Hawkins?
No.
Oh, okay. I think that's the one I buzzed out on. Then.
6 out of 8 is pretty damn good. It's Dick Van Arsdale and Paul Westphal to round out the top 8 there. And that's it, Max. Let's wrap up the rest of the off-season goings-on right now.
One thing I do want to say, because you sparked me on this one with Devin Booker maybe signing his third contract.
Yep.
This is perspective time. I know we lost the finals, guys. Could you imagine if we had like another 20-win season because of injury or something, and like we were just sitting here wondering, I wonder if Devin Booker's ever going to stay, right? That's all we'd be talking about. And instead, we're like actually have a real chance of him staying.
There's one thing I can guarantee you right now: we would not be recording this podcast if that was the case, Max.
No, that's a great point, David. I'm not sure that I would be even knowing what's going on with the Suns if that was the case. Might as well quit. Okay, so we're going to talk about the Abdel Nader signing, David, in conjunction with Torrey Craig leaving.
Yes.
Because I think these things are definitely related. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, and we'll probably rush through the last because we've got some really fun, interesting things to do at the end here. So, Torrey was signed pretty early, actually. Threw us all a little bit by surprise amongst the Chris Paul and campaign news. But yeah, let's talk about both of them in conjunction, one leaving and one staying, Max.
Yeah, I just want to make one point because you're right. We should go through these pretty quickly and then you can make a point and then we'll go on. I think that Torrey Craig definitely, they would have preferred Torrey Craig, but they don't want to have $5 million guaranteed with Torrey Craig on next year's bill.
100%.
Next 2 years' bill. So they signed Abdel Nader to a much cheaper contract with a option second year. That's the whole story.
Yep, 2 years, $10 million for Torrey Craig compared to Abdel Nader was used...
$242.
Yeah, 4.2. They have a team option as well on the second year.
Exactly.
Paid him just a little bit more than his minimum using his full bird rights. I really think the only point to make here is that Torrey in the playoffs showed that you kind of need that fourth wing that doesn't necessarily need to play a lot, but that you can throw out there. He played, I've got it here somewhere. He played 12.1 minutes per game over 22 games, Max, in the playoffs. So that's nothing to sneeze at, and that needs replacing. And I do think that whether it's, Nader being thrown into the Chris Paul trade, them playing him in the playoffs out of nowhere.
That was... David, that might have been the biggest surprise of the whole playoffs when he came into the game and, like, what was it, game 4 of the Clippers series?
Yeah.
Like, what the hell?
Yeah. And then re-signing him here. I do think that they believe that Nader can potentially be that. You know, he's 6'5", 225 compared to Craig 6'7", 221, but Nader does have a really freaky wingspan. So I think he can kind of be that guy. And again, I'm not going to read it out here. People can go and look at it if they want. But if you compare their 2 seasons last season for the Suns, they played pretty similar minutes, shot it the same, shot it from 3 relatively similar. Nader was actually better than Craig. They both provide pretty much the same rebounding, very little passing, and pretty much the same scoring. So, yeah, you're right. I think they probably would have just wanted Craig over Nader, but price comes into it, and it's a factor you have to think about.
And I think they're going to see how he plays to start this season, and if he's not up to it, that's going to be the number one thing they're trying to improve.
100%, I agree with you.
Frank Kaminsky, vet minimum. I don't have much of an opinion on this, David. He fits in the locker room. They really like him. He understands our system, I guess. I don't care. It's fine.
Yep, vet minimum. Only a $1.6 million cap hit, even though he gets paid a little bit more than that in cash. You hit the nail on the head there. Good locker room guy, and perfectly fine as a third big. Probably the only thing I would say is he brings a different look to the other 2 centers we discussed earlier, being 48 minutes of the same play. Frank can, in theory, shoot it a little bit better and pass it a little bit better than those 2 other big guys.
And he's okay in the regular season. I mean, we started him for like 9 games that we won in a row.
I had one question for you.
Yeah.
We saw a quote from Monty after the finals, that he regretted not giving Frank a chance more.
I missed that.
Did that 8-minute spurt save his career on the Suns, where they're kind of like, oh, maybe we should keep him?
It's such a good point. He was so randomly good in Game 6. That really may have changed the way a lot of people look at him. You could be totally right about that.
Elfrid Payton?
Yeah, mixed feelings on this. I immediately reaction to it was I don't really care that much. Then I realized it is a very important role, especially if Chris Paul's going to rest more. Mm-hmm. So we do want to have a very good fourth guard who could be the guy who's the floor manager. And I thought, hey, maybe Elfrid Payton could be good at that. He on the Knicks, he actually started a lot last year. Maybe he's the guy who could really, he's kind of come into his own as a veteran now and could pick that's kind of the stage of career he's at.
Yep.
But then I looked at his stats last season on the Knicks. He was absolutely terrible. So I don't really know what to think, David. It's a weird one. It's
a really different year last year for if you look at his Knicks stats versus, I guess, what the rest of his career has looked like. For his career, he's 10.9 points per game, 6.2 assists, 2.3 turnovers. So, clearly we like those point guards who can dish it and keep the turnovers relatively down.
How about his shooting splits, David?
Yeah, 45, 29 from 3, which isn't dismal, but it's pretty bad, and 63 from the free throw line, which is dismal. But I kind of look at this like Frank, third backup in that position, and a little bit of risk management in terms of having a capable guy during the season. James Jones clearly doesn't want to, have injuries risk, completely hijacking the season. He can, as you said, he started for the Knicks pretty much all last year, so he can jump in a pinch and play some games for you. And then much like Frank, a slightly different look to the other guys at that position. He brings size, a little bit of defense actually, and is probably not a great finisher around the rim. Definitely wasn't last year, but has been a little bit better in years prior. But he gets to the rim in a way that Chris Paul and Cam Payne don't, mainly because of his size compared to those 2 guys. So I think it's an okay look, just going with something a little bit different. See if you can have it hit like I guess Cam Payne did. We're all very down on that deal when he came into the bubble, kind of going, what are the Suns thinking? And look at us now talking about a 3-year, $19 million contract being an absolute steal for the Suns. So you never know, Max, even though I'm a little bit doubtful.
You don't know. I will just a couple more things. 48% true shooting is very, 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 very bad.
Yes.
Really, very bad. His on-off was just absolutely terrible. One of the worst on-offs I saw. And the advanced stats, I think partially because of that, just hate him.
Yeah.
So that's not great. Here's the thing. We're going to be able to tell when we're in the middle of February and Chris Paul's sit for 3 games and he's playing real minutes. There's a chance we're really we hate the Elfrid Payton minutes. That's a possibility.
Yes.
We'll see. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
All right. Should we get into our little exercise we're going to do here, David?
Yeah. Before we jump into that, I just thought last look now that we've looked at all the deals, what's left.
Okay.
We have 14 of 15 roster spots filled, so there is actually one spot remaining, which might come into the conversation we're going to have in a little bit. We actually still have one two-way spot left as well, but they didn't use that at all last year next to Tyshawn Alexander, so no expectation they'll use that again. You can carry up to 20 contracts in summer camp, so there's 5 more of those spots, so don't be shocked if you see someone announced to the Suns. It's probably just a non-guaranteed contract. We have the rest of the mid-level exception, we have the biannual exception, and of course those vet minimums. Although, as we also might get to in the last segment here, I'm not expecting the Suns to use any of those anytime soon, Max.
So just real quick on the buyout market, and we won't talk about this for long, but I just want to mention that I read your newsletter, and I love the little shot you had at the Kevin Love possibility.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there is a real possibility, and could be a kind of a secret agreement why they have that roster spot open. Would not shock me even a little bit.
Would not shock me at all. That's why I put it in there, because I definitely read in the tea leaves a little. I think that's definitely on the cards. But let's do it, Max. We've got Mikal Bridges and DeAndre Ayton extensions to talk about, and then maybe some trades at the back end of the pod just to tease there for everyone to stay on with us here as we jump through the rest of the episode. But we're going to mock kind of those extensions here, I think, Max, and hopefully cover most of the details that the team, player, and agents are probably covering right now, Max, as we speak.
Yep, so I'm going to be the player agent. David's going to be the Phoenix Suns. So I'm going to be Ayton and Bridges' agent. I don't think they have the same agent, but I don't know who their agents are, so I'm not entirely sure about that.
Bill Duffy is definitely DeAndre's,
okay,
with another agent kind of taking the day-to-day duties. I don't know about Mikal Bridges, but I don't believe it's the same.
Okay, but in this exercise, it will be the same. So this is not realistic. You're not going to have two different guys.
We're not going to make you put 2 different accents on. I can promise you that.
That's good. I can't do accents unlike you. All right, DeAndre Ayton. We're going to start with him. So I'm going to be the agent. I'm Bill Duffy, I guess. Coming to you, David. You're the Suns. I mean, did you see what happened in the playoffs, David? I was a revelation. I was known as the biggest jumper and one of the biggest jumpers in playoff history between regular season and playoff performance. I want the full max, David. I want the full max with the player option. I want the whole bag.
Well, Bill, what I can tell you is we are very, very impressed with the way that DeAndre showed out in the playoffs, and that definitely goes into our confidence in what we want to offer you this offseason. I will point out there's a couple of different maxes here, although, Bill, I'm sure you're very, very aware of it. Maybe the listeners who are a fly on the wall in this conversation aren't. There's the 4-year 25% max we can offer you, which is about $133 million, but I'm just going to go ahead and assume that is off the table for you. You're not going to sign a 4-year deal this offseason with the Phoenix Suns. Am I right in thinking that, Max? Or Bill?
My table... I'm at the same table as Rudy Gobert is at. Rudy Gobert's got a full max with the player option, and I want one of those too. I'm better than him.
Yep, so we can offer you 25% of the salary cap, what is called the designated rookie, which is 5 years, $172.5 million. And I can tell you right now, Bill and DeAndre, the Suns have that on the table for you as long as there is no player option in the 5th year. And once we agree to that, we can talk about some other stuff with the other percentage escalators. We didn't give Devin Booker a player option, I have to say, and it would be a terrible look for the franchise if we allow you a player option in the 5th year, DeAndre. So can you agree to full 5 years, guaranteed $172.5 million?
That's a fair point, James. It's a fair point. But Trae Young got one. I went ahead of him in the draft. Like I said, to Gobert, I'm better than that guy. Donovan Mitchell, Suns fans hate that guy. How could he possibly deserve one? But at the end of the day, you made the right point. Devin Booker is definitely I can't really not take the same contract he got, right? And I'm actually going to make more than him because the salary cap's higher.
Correct.
So let's do it. I'm in. I'm signing that.
Well, let's sign on the dotted line and then talk about, I guess, some other options. So, congratulations, coming back to the Suns. Full 5-year deal, $172.5 million, as long as the salary cap stays at what it's projected to be right now. Very happy to have you back, DeAndre. And the reason that we're happy that we could really kind of agree on that deal is, I think, what you sacrificed through the playoffs here and through your first 3 seasons. I think we definitely want to reward DeAndre for doing that. And I guess why the 5th year guaranteed was really important here was, if it does hit and DeAndre does keep, I'm going to break the fourth wall here now, Max, and just talk to you.
Wall,
if he keeps going in this trajectory, I do think that the Suns are in an interesting position this offseason where they need to reward the sacrifices that he made as a number 1 pick. I'm not going to go over that. Pretty much everyone listening would have heard us talk about this throughout the playoffs and leading up to it on the pods we were doing. I was really, really impressed with how much he hasn't sulked about touches, lent into the defense. Like, he really kind of knew what his best role for the Suns was. And I do think while they could try and cheap out and go, well, because of that role, your stats and your play isn't really reminiscent of a Luka Doncic, Trae Young, Max right now. I do think they have to reward it, but if they can keep the player option out and then keep these escalators out as far as they're very, very unlikely right now. So basically, Devin Booker, when he signed Max, there's these escalators between 25% and 30%, which if in this next season DeAndre happened to be MVP, Defensive Player of the Year, or make any of the 3 All-NBA teams, that figure can go up to what you've seen Luka Doncic and Trae Young be reported at, which is 5 years, $207 million. But for the Suns offering this deal fully guaranteed right now, what I'd kind of want back, that even if there's 1% chance that DeAndre's like the 3rd center All-NBA next year, I'd want the Suns, I guess, to be able to be rewarded for their confidence in DeAndre and keep him at the same $172 million contract. That's kind of how I've been looking at it. What do you think about that?
I think it's really interesting. I cannot see him doing that. I mean, it's hard.
No.
Because the thing about that is it's such a hard argument for the team to win, because it's like, wait, if I'm absolutely incredible, you don't want to pay me more? Like, it's really hard to just make that argument that you want that. I totally, it makes sense why you do want that, obviously. You want the better contract.
Yeah.
But, like, it's almost like that's like a scenario where everyone should be wanting that, and, like, why would you ever push back on it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. But I will note, Booker definitely wasn't a chance in his 5th year to make it, even though we were very, very high on him, and he still had the escalators. Like, that's the agent's job.
Yeah.
I think off the top of my head, he's only went to 27.5 if he made All-NBA. And he had to be the MVP in his 3rd year to get the full 30%. So again, I would expect that if we do see DeAndre sign a full max with the Suns, maybe there's some escalators to get it up to around 27.5 of the cap if he makes All-NBA. But I reckon, again, with Devin Booker not getting the player option, I reckon they'd cap it there and go, we're not giving you an in theory better deal than we gave Devin Booker a few years ago.
Yeah, and I'm sure they're very willing to give him the MVP escalators. Like, why would you ever not give a player MVP escalators? Like, either there's a really good chance they won't get it, and if they do get it in that small chance, like, it's amazing. You don't care. You'll pay whatever, right?
Yeah. And I think, last question here before we move on to Mikhail, it's like, I think you came with a pretty reasonable expectation about what DeAndre is going to get here. What do you want as a fan, as a person who's followed this team? Like, are you comfortable after the playoffs with that 5-year, 172 all locked in guaranteed, or do you have more than slight reservations about it, Max?
I don't have enough reservations where if I was running the team, it would ever stop me from doing it.
Yeah.
Just because it was just such an amazing playoff run, and like if the only thing could possibly happen is like, hey, in the regular season, this guy's not going to be that good, but in the playoffs, he's going to be like one of the more valuable bigs you can have in terms of anchoring your defense. Like, yeah, that's worth it. So I'm not that concerned. Like, the downside would be he's like never that again. But it's weird to think that a 22-year-old did that in the playoffs, would not do it again.
Yeah, I'm willing to bet on kind of that development arc,
Yep.
The skills that he's shown, and the coachability, which I talk about all the time with DeAndre, but I'm willing to bet on that. Dom, our friend on Twitter, touched on this, and I retweeted it the other day. I also think, and this is a good segue into Mikhail, we're also talking 2 years from now. So Do I believe DeAndre can be a $30 million player in year 1 of the contract 2 seasons from now? Yeah, Yeah, I do. Based on what I've seen in the playoffs and the way that he's grown recently, I really don't have any reservations about
No, he was borderline that in the playoffs this year, right?
Exactly,
So,
yeah.
So, like, it's hard to see. And also, he did show a couple things, like he wasn't doing it a lot because I think he was trying to play his role, but he did a couple flashes of off the dribble stuff that was really good in the playoffs.
He did.
Really, really exciting. And the last thing I would say on him is, one of the things that was worrisome about him was that he was very immature, right?
Yes.
And he's still sort of a kid personality, but it's not the same as it was before. Like that article that he wrote, or had a ghost written for him, obviously, was really good. I mean, it was definitely his ideas. And I think that I buy it. I buy that he cares about the game now. I buy that he likes to watch film now. It showed up. And I think that the fact that all turned a corner makes me think this is sustainable.
Yep. All right, let's move to Mikal now. Maybe less straightforward.
Yeah, I'm his agent. I don't really know what to do. All right, so here's what I'm going to say to you, James. A player in the other conference who went really far on a team that exceeded expectations, the Hawks, John Collins.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Listen, is he flashier than Mikal? Probably. Scores a few more points, does the dunks and stuff. But, I mean, who would you rather have? I think it's pretty close. I as his agent, no bias, I would have Mikal. Better defender by a lot. Can anchor our defense in a lot of ways. It's a better fit with your stars. Like, I don't know if Collins and Nate make sense. Like, Mikal fits everything that you have. So why not have the same contract as John Collins? It's got 5 years, 125 with a player option.
All right. Mikal and his agent, we can't offer you 5 years right now because we just gave 5 years to DeAndre and we can only have 2 designated rookies on the team at once, and that's currently Devin and DeAndre. However, I do take your point. I agree that you're a better player than John Collins. I'd also go to the conference over the other side of the country and look at a contract like OG Anunoby, who got 4 years, $72 million, which is a little bit of a difference between where you're at right now and where I guess we're starting with that contract, because we see you in a very similar position to where OG was, although I think that his agent, just between you and me, maybe undersold him a little bit, particularly when you see the money flowing around right now. What we can, just to set the scene, not saying we're going to offer you this, Mikal, the most we can offer you is 4 years, $133 million. That's your 25% rookie extension right now. We can only do 4 years. If we could do 5, we would. But it's the CBA. We can't do anything about that, Mikal. I'm sorry. We get punished for having 2 other very good rookies on this team, and you get punished for that. So I saw a poll on Twitter the other day where most people seem to think you're about 4 years, 80 million. I disagree with that. I think you're probably closer to 4 years, 100. We'd be willing to offer you $25 million for the next 4 years. How do you think about that?
First, I just got to say that at my agent parties, I see OG Anunoby's agent. We make fun of him all the time for that. It was idiotic. So, like, him and the campaign's agent, we just talk shit to them all the time. Those guys are idiots. That's interesting, though. 4 for 100. I mean, that's a pretty fair contract. I want my player option, though, because, you know what? I think there's a good chance that I exceed I think that, you're paying for what I am now. I think I could be possibly an off-the-dribble scorer someday, an all-star in the NBA. And I want, if that happens, the capability to opt out so I can go get a max somewhere.
Look, we see you, particularly in 2 years, being the absolute perfect fit with DeAndre and Devin Booker with what you bring. We're willing to bet on your development curve, get a little bit stronger, a little bit more playmaking, as you said, a little bit more off the dribble. We don't want to lose you to restricted free agency, even though you might come back after that. We'd much prefer to lock you in now. You won't do it without the player option.
All right, let me give you a slight offer then. How about I take a little less money for this player option?
Ooh, okay. What are you thinking?
Maybe like something so maybe a 25 starts that and declines, and whatever it ends up being, I think maybe that would be in like the 22, 23 range.
So should we just call it 4 for 90?
Okay, I don't have my calculator up, David. What is 4 for 90? 90 divided by 4, 22.5. Okay, and I get a player option on that.
4 for 90, player option in the 4th year. We can lock that in right now.
All right, I'm signing the dotted line.
That was easier than I thought.
So did I. I think, I think I didn't have this written down, but when I thought about a player option for Mikal Bridges, I thought that makes a lot of sense for him.
Yeah, I'm glad you
really exceed.
I'm really glad you brought that up, actually, because I wasn't thinking. I thought we were just going to have to haggle back and forth on that player option, around 4 for 100. To be totally fair, I wasn't even, and this just shows, guys, we didn't talk about this too much before what each of us were going to do. I wasn't really expecting you to throw the player option out there at all, which threw me a little bit. I think I agree, because he doesn't want to go to restricted free agency. The Suns don't want him to go to restricted free agency. There's a lot of reasons to get this done now, but when you talk about a guy like Mikal with how much growth could still come, I do think that, if you're offering him or getting him for a decent amount right now, you do need to give him that, flexibility that if he does really hit and the Suns can't afford to pay him, to go and get his money elsewhere.
Well, you know what? You use the OG Anunoby comparison. There's so many comparisons between those two players. He has a player option on his contract. And I think I would not be surprised at all if part of the reason why they got him on seemingly a steal contract is because the latent possible star upside OG had and Mikal has is makes it player option particularly attractive.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm glad we ended there. We may end up being way off. We're just playing the game here, guys. We don't have sources of how these contract negotiations are going on. Just using what we know and precedent to try and get to it. But yeah, I'm happy with that. I think as a max of what I'd be shocked at, I do think that around that $100 million mark, I think the Suns would kind of draw the line right here, right now. I do think that if the agent's going in wanting more than that, they'd probably go, all right, prove it and go to restricted free agency, I should say, and we'll match anything if you prove it in that 4th year, because there is still a fair bit of speculation on Mikal and his agent's part about what he is gonna be next year. If he has another kind of, doesn't improve at all, then I think anything over 80 million is probably a stretch for what he does right now. But you're kind of banking on some of those extra skills that you mentioned before.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That would be another result I wouldn't be surprised about, is if he just went into the season without an extension and just wanted to prove himself. Because that guy works his ass off. He's going to get better. I think he's going to get better. Okay, should we get into the trades, David?
Let's do it.
So I have a list of some for you. So I have 2 things I want to do. First, I want to talk about why it's hard to make trades, just really quickly. And that's because Dario, as we talked about earlier, is just flotsam now. It's really, really, really hard to trade him.
It sucks.
Yeah, it really sucks. And then the other thing is that Jalen Smith, no one wants him, I don't think. Why would you? He hasn't shown anything. The Suns overdrafted him. You can't treat him like he's a number 10 pick in value. He's probably a late first at best in value.
That's first team summer league 2nd year Jalen Smith to you.
Okay, yeah. First team. I wonder how the Suns lobbied for that probably a lot.
A first team that had 7 players in it, mind you, which I thought was ridiculous.
Are the agents the ones setting this right now?
I think so.
Wow. That's so ridiculous. But yeah, I don't think he has very much trade value, David. I don't think you disagree. So,
no.
That's what's hard about this. If you want to get into anything more than the kind of smallest trades, you got to start going out into future picks.
Yeah, I think we touched on this. I've definitely touched on Twitter, and you touched on it just then. The Dario injury really sucks. He was the perfect contract if he was healthy to put in a trade to make the team better. And if you can't find a trade of that, he was perfectly fine on that money with what he was contributing to the Suns, particularly when he was healthy and playing his best basketball. So, yeah, there's a number of reasons that I reckon after signing that contract, James Jones and the rest of the front office were just behind the scenes, obviously worried about DeAndre and Dario and the injury, but kind of kicking themselves that it had to happen right here, right now, because he was poised to be included in a trade to up the team, I think.
Yeah, not only does it hit you in the finals, it's the whole next year. It's such bad timing.
It really is.
Okay, so let's go through the trade. I just want to make that point because it's hard to trade. Put it that way. The biggest ones are obviously, we don't have to rehash these, but Thaddeus Young and Larry Nance, what everyone's talking about.
Yep.
I think Larry Nance is probably not going to happen. Maybe, I don't know, depends on what kind of start he gets off to the year on. And then Thaddeus Young, maybe, because I don't see why the Spurs want him that much. But again, maybe a future first. I don't know how we get him.
Yeah, it's really hard with salaries too, because he makes $14 million. So you have to include Dario and probably Jalen, of which, the Spurs are probably coming back saying, well, we don't actually want either of those guys. You're just including them to match salary. So what else are you including to, I guess, Thad by himself wouldn't have a huge price tag, but there are going to be some competition for him because he's a really good player. So, yeah, I think, to plug the newsletter that you mentioned before, that's really, the addition or issue to the newsletter before this podcast episode that everyone's listening to, I talked about what the Suns are hopefully trying to do with some of the flexibility and non-use of the exceptions that they've used so far, and how far they're sitting away from the tax. So, but the lens to look at it, I'm sure you've looked at it through this lens, and I'm interested to see some examples that you might throw up here, Max, is you really should be looking for, guys that improve the top 8 of the rotation. So think about the Western Conference Finals, think about the finals, like who are guys that are going to actually bump someone else out of that top 8 and make the overall rotation better. I think free agency, they address the insurance and risk management with JaVale and Peyton and Kaminsky coming back and trading for Landry Shamet. But really with a trade, you're probably looking at more of like, who's a real upgrade here? So hopefully that's the way that you've looked at it here, Max, and we can talk about a few players maybe.
Yep, I have 3 of those exact players, David. I have 2 little smaller ones to start with. One is Brandon Clark. He sort of got out of the rotation, and I just wanted to mention it because it's the Champ podcast. Can I get both of my team, please?
Can't Johnson and Brandon Clark, then, we don't lose.
Exactly. It'd be perfect. We'd win every single game. But, I don't know. He fell out of the rotation, maybe. I don't know what we trade for him, but, he's very low value. Be really interesting. I just kind of thought he fits on our team. The other one that's smaller is Kelly Olynyk. He just signed, so it would have to be after December 15th.
Yep.
But he would be an interesting backup option. A little more kind of combination of what Dario and Frank bring, kind of.
What's his starting salary?
12 million.
Okay, so you're looking at probably Dario and a pick, or
Dario and Jalen, maybe.
Yeah,
Jalen shows something. And the Pistons aren't going to win.
Yeah, and I think this is really great time, and I did mention this in the newsletter. Trades. Maybe there would be a trade before the season, but when you're talking about trades, you probably are thinking more during the season, after that December 15 deadline, and probably even closer to the actual trade deadline. That deadline forces teams to make moves. They love to stand pat until they really have to make a move. So then all of a sudden, the guys that Phoenix have signed become tradable as well, which I think is really interesting, because JaVale, particularly if you're going after a guy like Kelly Olynyk, JaVale is kind of surplus then. He'd really only be, in case of emergency with DeAndre. So you could maybe get away with including, his $5 million and Jalen's 4 and change, and you'd have enough to actually match a Kelly Olynyk deal, which would be really interesting.
No, I very much agree. I think it makes sense as like you don't do a big thing kind of move.
Yeah,
yeah.
He'd be top 8. I would definitely this. The recent version of Kelly Olynyk would be a legit backup big. You talk about top 8, you need one small, one wing, and one big, basically, as the 3 guys off the bench, and he would definitely fit that hole.
I have 3 better ones, way better ones for you, David.
Okay, if that's the bad one, I'm excited for these.
I went through the whole league. I literally today I looked at every single player on every single roster. And these were the 3 that I thought were the most interesting for the Suns potentially, and they're all going to require us to give something up.
Yep.
In ascending order. So this is the cheapest one. So the first one I thought about: if the Blazers blow it up, trade Dame Lillard. Robert Covington has 1 year, $13 million left. That's an interesting fit to play a way upgraded version of the Torrey Craig role.
I just took a sip of my water, and when you said Dame Limited, I nearly spat it all over my computer.
He's a little higher than I'm talking.
Yeah, Covington, I like it. That's your wing, your 4th wing replacement, like we spoke about earlier. So yeah, interesting name for sure, particularly if
he can kind of play the 4 a little bit too.
Yes, yeah. Well, he played the 5 with the Rockets.
Yeah, right. So I think he gives you that versatility you're kind of looking for. It's kind of what I'm looking for, right? That 4 versatile 4 kind of thing. Yeah, I agree. I think I didn't have names, but I said if you are looking at holes, it's like whether one of your names might fit this hole, a legit 3rd guy, or a legit creator at small forward, power forward, or more athleticism across the wings, and Covington definitely fits that 3rd hole that I've just mentioned. Yeah, I didn't go for any that are like stars or third best players. I went for those I thought were semi-realistic, but they get less realistic as we go.
Yeah.
So next one I thought was Sacramento. They almost traded this guy last year by all accounts. There was a bidding war for him, kind of. Harrison Barnes is $20 million this year, $18 million next. You got to trade a little more to get him, but he'd be an interesting fit, I think.
It's really funny. I reckon first off season of this pod, Harrison Barnes was mentioned as a free agency guy we didn't want the Suns to go for. Then second season, he was kind of like, hey, we could trade for this guy, and he, like, you know, everyone's down on him, but it wouldn't be the worst move in the world. And now we're like, get Harrison Barnes.
Yep. He gets more and more attractive, doesn't he?
He does.
I think his game's aging very well. I think he fits this new modern game as like a big, as a realistic four. You could put Crowder in that trade probably and have him start. I think that would make a lot of sense for the
Yeah, I think I had Harrison in a trade deadline
nice.
this past season with Jay Crowder going back the other way, because it was, yeah, you know, I love Jay Crowder, but it was like, if you feel like you're still not getting enough scoring out of the third guy, whether it's DeAndre or Mikal, you know, you throw Harrison in there at the starting four and he can create a little bit more. He's a really just interesting case in terms of, you know, he's kind of gone back now, or if he came to a team like the Suns, he goes back to the role that he played on the Warriors and played really, really well before he had that, you know, playoff series where he couldn't hit a shot and everyone hated him because he was the, you know, fifth best player on an amazing team that kind of choked a little bit in the playoffs. But he had to have that moment where he went to Dallas to become, I guess, more than the Warriors were letting him be, and now he's kind of, as you said, aging well, because he's gone back the other way to being exactly probably who he should have been all along.
Yeah, 100% agree on all accounts. Last one, David. This is the highest reach one, but I think it's still possible, because he was rumored a little bit at the trade deadline. Jeremy Grant would be a really interesting high upside swing move, you know?
Yeah, and doesn't actually, you know, his contract was crazy to people at the time of him signing it and leaving for Detroit, but off the top of my head, it's what, like 20 mil?
Yeah, it's 20 this year and 20 next year, and it's over.
Yeah, so you could throw probably, again, Dario, Jalen Smith, and you'd probably only need one other minimum contract, I think, to get up to salary matching off the top of my head for a deal like that. So, yeah, I think that's really interesting as well. You could then maybe, whether Crowder's in the deal or not, yeah, you could make some personnel moves around that top 8 and who's starting and who's coming off the bench. Athleticism, you know, that's one thing we've always noted with this team, that it kind of lacks a little bit, and that maybe was bared out a little bit in some of those playoff series. You know, you can play the Suns a particular way because they don't have a lot of athleticism on both ends.
Yeah, that one, I think it's like a home run swing kind of. I think you only do it if, like, we get off to kind of a bad start next year and things are kind of sour. We totally shake things up. Maybe we do that. I think that it's much more realistic to do. Covington or Barnes would be much more realistic, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, definitely.
All right, should we do 7 seconds or less, David?
Yeah, I think the last thing I'd just say is, like, I'm not ready to give a grade of this offseason overall. Because Mikal and Ayton haven't been done, so I just don't think we can until then. But as I alluded to in my newsletter, I think James Jones and the Suns, you know, at least appear to me to be leaving some of this flexibility for trades, which is why I'm glad we touched on it at the end here, because, you know, I don't think, kind of like James Jones's tenure as the GM right now, we can't judge specific moves. We kind of have to judge the whole sum of the parts, which I think we're not going to be able to do with what I'm predicting the Suns are looking to do here until probably after the trade deadline going into the playoffs, is when we can actually have a serious discussion about how they did this offseason. I know that sounds like, you know, bitching out or whatever, and we're trying to kick the can down the road, but I really think that they didn't like what was there in free agency, and they've kind of given themselves flexibility for you know, going forward a little bit, Max.
I totally agree. You can't judge what they've done so far. They're not done with what they're doing yet. But I mean, I love the offseason so far, just because the campaign, Chris Paul contracts are so ridiculous.
Yep.
And then also because they traded for Landry Shamet, David. I mean, how amazing is that for me? I got to watch Landry Shamet play for the defending Western Conference champion Suns all next year. Sign me up, man.
They could have just stopped there on draft day, and you probably would have given them an A+. Let's be honest.
David, the Landry Shamet and the Phoenix Suns are going to be on national TV 34 times next year.
Amazing. I love it.
They're the 4th in the league, and that's a weird thing to say. Okay, 7 seconds or less. We're going to ask each other 3 questions. You guys know how it goes. Do you want to go first or do you want me to go first?
You go first, Max.
What are you most excited about for next season?
I am most excited for what DeAndre Ayton looks like after that playoff series. I think we could see him go back to being regular season DeAndre, and then there'll be lots of conversations around like, well, he just saves his best for the playoffs, he's taking it easy. There'll be lots of comments, particularly if he signs an extension, that he's just, got his second contract, like that famous quote, and then packed it in. I also think it could go the other way and we just see a really motivated, losing the finals hurt the hell out of him. He wants to become the legit third guy after the Suns have shown faith, have given him the extension, and he could just come out and dominate. So I have no idea right now. I could see both. I really obviously hope it's the latter rather than the former, but I'm really excited about that. What about you?
That was a really good answer to my small little question there. That was really good. Mine's much less profound. I'm just excited for Booker's I was the second best player in the finals and won a gold medal tour. And that's how much he's going to be. I think his confidence is going to be off the charts next season.
Love it.
I'm excited for that. All right, what's your question?
If you could steal one free agent signing from this offseason that the Suns had the means to achieve, which one would it be?
If I could steal one from the rest of the league?
Yeah.
Ooh, that's interesting. Do you have one I could stall and think of mine?
Yeah, I think for me, what I was looking at, and that's why I added what they could achieve, we'd still, if you did something a little bit different with JaVale's contract, we could have done that Patty Mills 12 mil 2 years deal. Obviously, he chose it because he's going to a team that, as much as you hate me to say it, probably has more of a chance to win the NBA Finals than the Suns right now. But and I am biased a little bit with him here after watching him through the Olympics. But that was just a steal of a deal. If you could have him coming off the bench, instead of Landry Shamet, as much as I know you love Shamet, I would be all about that, Max.
Patty Mills is much more ready to be on a championship team doing that.
Yeah.
No one can be mad at you after seeing what Kevin Durant did in the Olympics to say that the Nets are, and the playoffs, the Nets are the favorites. The Nets are definitely favorites. I guess mine would maybe be PJ Tucker.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be a much better player than McGee in that same role, sort of. No, it's not the same kind of thing, but PJ Tucker would be fun to have a reunion tour. I'd like that.
The only thing there, he swindled Miami.
Yeah, I agree with that.
He got 2 years at the mid-level with a player option.
Yeah, I don't understand the player option. Why do they have to give him that? I didn't get that
It's
either.
ridiculous.
Maybe they had competition. I don't know. Maybe the Suns wanted him. All right. Which move that we discussed today, realistically, would you be most excited about the Suns doing going forward?
Which move that we discussed today, realistically? So one of the trades or one of the extensions?
One of the trades or anything, or the Kevin Love thing, anything we talked about. Yeah, non-extensions.
I will say this, because we touched on it a little bit before. I mentioned in the newsletter, I would be really intrigued by a Kevin Love redemption thing. And I'll put it out there right now. He may just be shit.
Yeah.
Everything we've seen from Kevin Love recently might be exactly who he is. But after what Blake Griffin did, and me being a fan of going for Blake Griffin, and a lot of people saying, well, look how crap he's been on Detroit. Is he really going to be better than Frank Kaminsky? Guys, he's better than Frank Kaminsky now, and is
better.
A really good value signing on the Nets coming back for the minimum. Kevin Love, I believe, still has that in him. He is every bit as good as ground-bound Blake Griffin. So I'd be just intrigued if they managed to pick him up on a buyout, whether there is a redemption tour for Kevin Love, and that being on the Suns, particularly with it being a position of need. You'd feel that similar Kelly Olynyk type role. That would intrigue me greatly, for sure.
No, you're exactly right. I think Blake Griffin's a great thing to point to, because I think everybody mocked that a little bit. He's not going to be good again, and then he was the best player in 2 playoff games.
Exactly.
So I absolutely think you're right about that. It's not like Kevin Love is 100 years old. He's 32, 33, something like that?
Yep.
He's not infinite years old. I think that, gets on the vegan diet with Chris Paul, maybe shows him how to eat.
Was never athletic in the first place either, which I think gets kind of underrated with injuries. It's not like Blake Griffin, who had to reinvent himself with injuries. Kevin Love can basically be the exact same guy he's always been if he can get healthy.
And rejuvenated Kevin Love is basically just a better version of what Dario was last year. That'd be great on our team.
100%, and a way better rebounder.
I would like that. Okay, I changed my answer to that. I was going to say Robert Covington, because I think we get him for cheap, but I like the Kevin Love being rejuvenated thing.
Who had your favorite and least favorite off seasons of the other 29 NBA teams, Max?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I really, really like the Nets offseason. Like, Patty Mills thing was great.
Yeah.
And just, I mean, part of it's, getting Durant for 4 more years. I think they signed the best player in the world for a long-term contract again. That can't go overlooked.
Yep, agreed.
I would say.
Agreed.
And then the bad one, that's a good question. I mean, probably the Pelicans.
Yeah, no one knows
Pelicans,
what's going on there.
They're just going to lose Zion with the way they're going. It's so bad.
Yep, they're really desperate right now. They remind me of a team that we've talked many, many hours about in the past, and hopefully they can find a reason to get out of it. Hopefully part of that reason is Willie Green, the new coach.
Yeah,
I hope he goes well.
Hopefully that'll help. I'm glad Chris Paul didn't join him. I'll just say that. All right, so the Phoenix Suns won 51 games last year, David. I think that's a 58-win pace.
Yep.
How many games do they win this season coming up?
Hey, Max.
Yeah, same question?
Yep.
Of course. That doesn't surprise me at all.
We always do this, and I love it. All right, we can round it out with the same question each. You said 58-win pace. I thought... some things went their way. They got on a real run there. I'm not sure whether I'd expect 58 again, but there is some real improvement. Gun to my head, I'd say 55.
Okay, so you're going under with the 58 pace.
Yeah.
I did this the other day. I had him at 58 exactly when I did it. That's why I asked the question. I think it's a weird way to look at it, right? Because it's like, a lot of things did go their way, but also there should have internal improvement, right? Like that what they did in the playoffs had made them better basketball players, obviously, right? So they should be better.
They should. I guess the pessimist in me is like, we basically got full seasons out of Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and if they have even slight injury concerns, I'd much prefer we lose a few regular season games and have them healthy for the playoffs. So that it's not me being down on them and being better than last year. I just think we learnt that maybe they can get themselves to a similar seed whilst being a little less banged up. Although, you kind of do, but this is the history with Chris Paul, they were kind of freak injuries. It's not like it was because he played so long in the regular season. So, I don't know. I'm going 55, but I could definitely see more.
And part of why, and last thing, part of why I think they might have a pretty high win total is, like, when Chris Paul sits this year, which I think will be more, I just trust them to win those games more. Yeah. Like, I just think those guys know how to win. Like, they won 2 Western Conference Finals games without him.
True.
They're not going to be scared to play a regular season game without him,
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be important. But that's it. That was fun, David.
It has been an absolute pleasure to do this one. Just as it's been a pleasure to do the pods the last little while. I know they don't come as early and often as we used to do them to all the listeners there at home, but they're always really well received when we do put them out. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to do this again, and everyone else jumping in and listening to us and giving us the feedback that we were so used to back in the day. And thanks to the Suns, as we said before, we just wouldn't be doing it with the lives that we currently have right now if this team wasn't this fun to talk about. Max.
Absolutely true. And man, if they keep this up, like, as long as you have a newsletter and some place to put it, like, I'll happily jump on this thing every once in a while. I'll take a look at this team.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a decent break now, but I can't help myself. I cannot help myself. If this team is just as fun to talk about next year as it was this, then we'll definitely be back for the odd one of these where we go somewhere between 1 hour and 30 minutes and 2 hours, as always, Max, and chock a lot in there, and hopefully everyone enjoys listening to this one too.
Yeah, and shout out to Mike and Sam who have to do this all the time. Like, oh man, you guys are warriors. After every playoff game, you guys are warriors for what you did in the finals, man. Thank you on behalf of all Suns fans for that.
Definitely.
All right, talk to you guys later.